It was just another Tuesday at Pete's Diner, the kind of place where coffee stains decorated the worn countertops and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead like tired fireflies. Jake Wilson slumped in the corner booth, his basketball shoes, once white, now gray from overuse, peeking out from beneath the table. The waitress had already given him that look, the one that said his time was up if he wasn't ordering anything more than a water refill. Jake stared at his phone, the banking app displaying a balance that made his stomach tighten. $3.42. Not enough for another coffee, let alone the meal his body desperately needed after today's grueling practice. As a walk-on player for State University, he had the prestige of wearing the team colors, but none of the scholarship benefits his teammates enjoyed. Just 5 more minutes, he mumbled to the waitress as she passed, her sympathetic smile not quite reaching her eyes. She'd seen his type before, college kids stretching their dollars like rubber bands until they eventually snapped. Outside, rain pelted the windows, turning the world beyond the glass into a blurry watercolor. Jake couldn't afford an Uber back to his apartment, and his roommate wouldn't be done with classes for another hour. So here he sat, hungry, tired, and increasingly unwelcome. His phone buzzed with a text from Coach Reynolds. "Film study tomorrow 6 a.m. Be there." Jake sighed. Another early morning after his late shift stocking shelves at the campus bookstore. The juggling act was becoming impossible, maintaining his grades, working 20 hours a week, and still showing up to practice with enough energy to prove he belonged on the team. "Sir, I'm going to need you to order something else or free up the table," the manager said, suddenly appearing beside him. His name tag read Doug, and his expression held none of the waitress's compassion. "I'm just waiting for the rain to let up," Jake explained, knowing it sounded like an excuse. "Just another few minutes?" Doug's face hardened. "We have paying customers waiting. This isn't a public shelter." The words stung more than they should have. Jake gathered his worn backpack, the same one he'd had since high school, and stood up, his knees aching from practice. A small hole in his athletic shorts caught on the edge of the table, tearing slightly wider. Perfect. Another thing he couldn't afford to replace. "I understand. I'm leaving," Jake said, dignity scraping the bottom of his emotional reserves like his bank account. As he moved toward the door, a man at the counter turned slightly. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, but Jake was too embarrassed to make eye contact with anyone. The stranger wore a simple gray hoodie, baseball cap pulled low, watching the interaction from behind a menu. Jake pushed through the door into the rain, the cold droplets immediately soaking through his thin team windbreaker. He hunched his shoulders against the weather and started walking, his stomach growling in protest. Behind him, the diner door chimed again. "Hey, wait up!" Jake didn't turn at first, assuming the voice wasn't calling to him. Nobody ever did. "Excuse me, basketball guy." That made him stop. He turned to see the man from the counter jogging toward him, hood now pulled up against the rain. As he got closer, recognition dawned on Jake like a slow-rising sun. No way, it couldn't be. The man reached him, slightly out of breath, raindrops catching on his familiar beard. "Man, glad I caught you. That wasn't right. What happened in there?" Jake blinked rainwater from his eyes, wondering if exhaustion was making him hallucinate, because standing in front of him, in a simple gray hoodie and jeans, was Stephen Curry. The Stephen Curry. "You're—" Jake started, unable to finish the sentence. The man smiled, that same smile Jake had seen countless times on television screens and basketball courts. "Yeah, I am. But more importantly, who are you? And why is a fellow hooper getting kicked out into the rain?" Jake's mind raced, thoughts colliding like players scrambling for a loose ball. Why would Stephen Curry, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, be in a rundown diner in a college town talking to him? "I'm Jake Wilson. I play, I'm on the team at State." His voice sounded distant, even to his own ears. "State's got a solid program?" Curry nodded. "You looked like you were having a rough moment in there. Everything okay?" The compassion in his voice nearly broke Jake's carefully constructed facade. For weeks, he'd been telling everyone, his parents back home, his coaches, his friends, that everything was fine, that he was managing. Now, standing in the rain with his basketball idol, the truth felt too heavy to carry anymore. Just trying to make it work. Basketball, school, bills. Jake shrugged, attempting casualness. Some days are harder than others. Curry studied him with eyes that seemed to see more than Jake was saying. I know something about that. Not the way you might think, but I know what it means to be underestimated, to work twice as hard for half the recognition. A car splashed by, sending a wave of dirty water over the curb. Jake barely noticed. Listen, Curry continued, I was about to grab some food. Why don't you join me? Somewhere else, obviously. He smiled, gesturing back at the diner. I think we've both worn out our welcome there. Jake hesitated. This felt surreal, like one of those dreams where you're suddenly shooting hoops with your hero, only to wake up to your alarm and another day of grinding reality. I can't really afford... He stopped, shame coloring his cheeks more than the cold rain. Curry waved away his concern. My treat. Consider it a professional courtesy between basketball players. Those simple words, between basketball players, hit Jake like a perfect pass, right where he needed it. Not charity, respect, from someone who knew the game, who understood the sacrifice. There's a place a few blocks from here, Jake found himself saying. Nothing fancy, but they make a mean burger. Lead the way, Curry replied, falling into step beside him. As they walked through the rain, Jake couldn't help but notice how ordinary it felt, just two guys seeking shelter from the storm. And yet, with each step, something shifted inside him. The weight he'd been carrying didn't disappear, but somehow it became more bearable. Neither of them knew it yet, but this chance encounter in the rain was about to change everything. Not with money or fame or quick fixes, but with something far more powerful, recognition. The kind that says, I see you, I see your struggle, and it matters. The rain continued to fall, washing away the boundaries between superstar and struggling student, between hopelessness and possibility. And somewhere in that gray afternoon, a story was beginning that would eventually shock everyone, most of all Jake himself. The small burger joint Jake led them to was called Hoop Dreams, a name that felt almost too perfect given his company. Unlike the diner, this place welcomed them with warm yellow light and the sizzling sound of patties on the grill. The few patrons inside were focused on their meals or phones, creating a bubble of anonymity that Stephen Curry seemed to appreciate. They settled into a corner booth, the vinyl seats cracking slightly under their weight. Jake still couldn't quite believe he was sitting across from the NBA superstar, their knees almost touching under the small table. This place has been here forever, Jake explained, his voice still carrying a hint of nervousness. Coach says the original owner played for State back in the 70s. Curry nodded, looking around at the faded team photos and memorabilia that covered the walls. That's what I love about the game. It connects people across generations, across different walks of life. A middle-aged waitress approached, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized Curry, but she maintained her professional composure. What can I get you boys? Whatever he's having, I'll have the same, Curry said, nodding toward Jake. You're the local expert here. Jake ordered 2 double cheeseburgers with fries and chocolate shakes, the most substantial meal on the menu. As the waitress walked away, he felt a twinge of guilt about ordering something so expensive on someone else's dime, even if that someone was a multi-millionaire athlete. So, tell me about yourself, Jake. You play what position? Curry asked, leaning back in the booth. Point guard, actually, Jake admitted with a small smile. Been studying your game since I was a kid. Now you're making me feel old, Curry laughed. But seriously, that's the toughest position on the court. You've got to see everything, know where everyone is, where they're going to be. Jake nodded. That's what I love about it. It's like chess, but at full speed. His passion momentarily overcame his shyness. Last game, I saw this defensive shift they were using against our forward, so I called an audible, changed the play mid-possession. Coach was mad at first, but when it worked... His voice trailed off as he realized he was rambling. But Curry was leaning forward, genuinely interested. That's the stuff right there. Reading the game, trusting your instincts. Can't coach that. Their food arrived, and Jake tried not to devour his burger too quickly, despite his hunger. Between bites, Curry asked about his studies, his family back in Ohio, and his dreams after college. Jake found himself opening up more than he had to anyone in months. Engineering major, huh? That's impressive while playing ball, Curry commented, dipping a fry in ketchup. How are you managing the workload? The simple question cracked open the dam Jake had built around his struggles. Honestly, not great. I'm on academic probation this semester, missed too many classes because of away games and work. You're working on top of everything else? Curry asked, his expression shifting to one of deeper concern. Jake nodded, staring down at his half-eaten burger. Have to. Walk-on players don't get scholarships. I stock shelves at the campus bookstore, do some tutoring when I can find the time. It's just... He hesitated, embarrassed to be complaining to someone who had worked harder than most to reach the pinnacle of the sport. Just what? Curry prodded gently. Just never enough, Jake admitted. I'm always one bill away from having to drop basketball or drop out entirely. My parents help when they can, but Dad's factory laid off workers last year, and they're just getting back on their feet. The weight of his situation hung in the air between them. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, painting the windows with delicate streaks. You know, Curry said after a thoughtful pause, people look at me now and see the success, the contracts, the championships. What they don't see is the doubt. The coaches who said I was too small, too fragile. The scouts who passed me over. The injuries that made me question everything. Jake looked up, surprised by the candor. Everyone knew Curry's underdog story, but hearing it directly from him felt different, more raw and real. There was a time in college when I was ready to quit, Curry continued. The ankle injuries kept coming back. I'd work my way to full strength, then, bam, back to square one. One night, sitting in my dorm with my foot in an ice bucket, I seriously considered walking away. What changed? Jake asked quietly. My dad told me something I never forgot. He said, greatness isn't about never falling down. It's about how many times you're willing to get back up when nobody's watching. Curry leaned forward. The question isn't whether you'll get knocked down, Jake. Everyone does. The question is, what happens next? Something about those words resonated deep within Jake's chest. He'd been getting up again and again for so long that he'd forgotten to ask himself why. Basketball wasn't just a sport to him. It was the thread that had held his life together through every hardship. I don't know if I have what it takes, Jake admitted, voicing his deepest fear. Not like you did. Curry shook his head. Nobody knows that until they're tested. And from what I can see, you're being tested right now. He pointed to Jake's practice jersey, visible under his open jacket. You're still wearing the uniform. That says something. The waitress returned, clearing their empty plates. Can I interest you gentlemen in some pie? On the house. Her eyes lingered on Curry with unmistakable recognition. Actually, Curry said with a smile, we need to talk some business first. Could you give us a few minutes? After she left, Curry's expression turned more serious. I'm in town for a youth basketball clinic tomorrow. We need some local players to help demonstrate drills, work with the kids. It's a paid position. He held up a hand as Jake started to speak. And before you say anything, this isn't charity. I've seen your state games on tape. You've got good fundamentals, good court vision. We need that. Jake's mind raced. Was this really happening? I have classes tomorrow morning, but I'm free afternoon. Perfect. The clinic runs from 2 to 6. Curry pulled out his phone. Give me your number, and my team will text you the details. The pay is $500 for the afternoon. $500. That would cover next month's rent with enough left over for groceries. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he recited his number. As they prepared to leave, Curry hesitated. One more thing, Jake. I'm working with the university athletics department on a project. Would you be willing to meet me on campus tomorrow morning, say around 10? Of course, Jake replied without hesitation. Whatever sleep he might lose was worth the opportunity to spend more time with Stephen Curry. They stepped outside into the clearing night. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the streets shining under the streetlights like polished hardwood. Thanks for dinner, Jake said, extending his hand, and for the opportunity tomorrow. Curry shook it firmly. Thank you for the company. Sometimes it's good to remember where we all start from. He glanced up at the clearing sky. Looks like the storm's passing. As Jake watched him walk away, he couldn't help but feel that Curry meant something more than just the weather. For the first time in months, The weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter, the path ahead a little clearer. What he didn't know was that tomorrow would change everything, in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. The next morning arrived with golden sunshine that seemed to mock yesterday's gloom. Jake woke before his alarm, the events of the previous evening still feeling like an elaborate dream. He checked his phone. Sure enough, there was a text from an unknown number with details about the basketball clinic. It was real. Jake's roommate Tyler was still asleep when he slipped out of their cramped apartment. He hadn't told Tyler about meeting Stephen Curry, partly because he worried it would sound like a fabrication, and partly because he wanted to hold the experience close, like a lucky charm. The campus was quiet at 9:30 a.m., most students still in their morning classes. Jake made his way to the athletics complex, heart beating faster with each step. The modern glass and steel building housed State's basketball arena, training facilities, and athletic department offices. A stark contrast to the aging academic buildings where Jake spent most of his time. At the reception desk, Jake cleared his throat. "I'm Jake Wilson. I have a meeting with, Stephen Curry at 10. The receptionist raised an eyebrow but checked her computer. "Yes, you're on the schedule. They're in conference room B, down the hall to your right." They? Jake wondered who else would be at this meeting as he walked down the hallway, passing trophy cases filled with the university's proudest athletic moments. His reflection in the glass showed a young man in a simple blue button-down and khaki pants, the nicest outfit he owned, reserved for class presentations and job interviews. When he reached conference room B, Jake took a deep breath before knocking. The door swung open to reveal not just Stephen Curry, but Coach Reynolds and Athletic Director Peterson seated around a table with documents spread before them. "Jake, right on time," Curry said, standing to shake his hand. "Come in, have a seat." Jake nodded nervously to his coach, who looked equally surprised to see him in this context. Director Peterson, a stern woman in her 50s who rarely attended regular team practices, studied Jake with newfound interest. "Wilson, I didn't realize you knew Mr. Curry personally," Coach Reynolds said, his tone somewhere between impressed and suspicious. "We just met yesterday, actually," Jake admitted, taking the empty chair across from them. Curry smiled. "Sometimes the most important connections happen when you least expect them." He turned to the others. "As I was explaining, my foundation is launching a new initiative focused on student athletes who demonstrate exceptional character and work ethic, despite financial hardship." Jake's pulse quickened. Was this why he'd been invited? "The Stephen Curry Academic Athletic Merit Scholarship," Director Peterson added, sliding a glossy folder across the table. "Full tuition, room and board, plus a stipend for expenses. A significant commitment from Mr. Curry's foundation to State University." "And we want you to be the first recipient," Curry said, looking directly at Jake. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jake stared at the folder, unable to process what he was hearing. I don't understand," he finally managed. "Why me?" Coach Reynolds leaned forward. "Mr. Curry asked me about players who might benefit from this opportunity. I mentioned several names, including yours." He had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "I didn't realize he would encounter you personally." "Sometimes the universe has its own playbook," Curry said. "After meeting you yesterday, hearing your story, seeing your determination despite the challenges you're facing, it confirmed everything Coach Reynolds told me about your character." Jake's mind raced. A full scholarship would change everything. No more late nights stocking shelves, no more choosing between textbooks and groceries, no more constant fear of having to drop out. "This isn't a handout," Curry continued, as if reading Jake's thoughts. "The scholarship comes with responsibilities. Maintaining your grades, community service hours, mentoring younger players. We're investing in you because we believe you'll invest in others." Director Peterson nodded. "We've already processed the paperwork. If you accept, the scholarship takes effect immediately. This semester's tuition will be reimbursed, and you'll receive your first stipend payment next week." It was too much to absorb. Jake looked down at his hands, noticing a small callus on his palm from yesterday's practice drills. Every blister, every aching muscle, every sleepless night studying after work, they flashed through his mind like highlights from a long, difficult game. "What about the other walk-ons?" Jake asked suddenly. "There are guys on the team working just as hard as me." The question seemed to surprise everyone in the room, everyone except Curry, whose expression softened with understanding. "That's exactly why you're the right choice," he said quietly. "The scholarship will expand to include more recipients next year. For now, we're starting with one. But nothing's stopping you from using your platform to advocate for your teammates." Coach Reynolds cleared his throat. "Wilson, do you understand what's being offered here? This is a life-changing opportunity." "I do understand, Coach." Jake looked up, meeting Curry's gaze. "And I'm incredibly grateful. It's just a lot to process." "Take the day," Curry suggested. "Think it over. Talk to your family. We'll still see you at the clinic this afternoon, and you can give us your decision after." Jake nodded, rising from his chair. "Thank you, all of you. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything yet," Curry replied, standing to shake his hand again. "Just know that this isn't about charity. It's about recognizing potential and removing the barriers that keep it from flourishing." As Jake left the conference room, his legs felt unsteady beneath him. He wandered into the empty basketball arena, finding himself drawn to center court. The vast space was silent, except for the faint hum of air conditioning. Above him, championship banners hung from the rafters. Years of history, dreams realized and broken, all within these walls. He sat down on the hardwood floor, right on the State University logo, and called his parents. His mother answered, her voice immediately concerned about why he was calling in the middle of a weekday. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "something incredible just happened." As Jake recounted the meeting, his mother's sobs of joy echoed through the empty arena. His father came on the line too, his usually stoic voice thick with emotion. "Son, we've always believed in you," his father said. "Through every setback, every struggle, we knew your character would see you through. We just didn't know it would be Stephen Curry who recognized it too." Jake laughed through his own tears. "I still can't believe it's real." "Believe it," his mother insisted. "You've earned this, Jake, not just with your basketball, but with your heart." After hanging up, Jake remained on the court for a long time, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams that streamed through the high windows. Yesterday, he'd been at his breaking point, ready to admit defeat. Today, his path had completely changed course. By the time he left the arena to prepare for the basketball clinic, Jake had made his decision. The scholarship wasn't just about money or basketball, it was about responsibility. The responsibility to make the most of an opportunity to prove Curry's faith in him wasn't misplaced, and to someday pay forward this moment of life-changing kindness. What Jake didn't realize was that his story was about to spread far beyond the walls of State University. By nightfall, what began as a chance encounter between a struggling student and an NBA superstar would become something that neither of them had anticipated, a message that would resonate with thousands of other young athletes fighting their own uphill battles in silence. The real impact of Stephen Curry's gesture was just beginning to unfold. The youth basketball clinic was held at the community center near campus, a modest facility that had seen better days. Children aged 8 to 14 filled the court, their excited chatter creating a buzz of energy that filled the space. Most were from local schools, many from underprivileged neighborhoods where basketball represented more than just a game. It was a pathway to possibility. Jake arrived early to help set up, still processing the morning's events. He arranged orange cones for dribbling drills and hung nets on portable hoops, finding comfort in the familiar routines of basketball preparation. Other college players began to arrive, some from state, others from nearby schools, all wide-eyed at the prospect of working alongside Stephen Curry. "Wilson, you're here early," remarked Dion, another walk-on from State's team. "Heard you're tight with Curry now. That true?" Word traveled fast in basketball circles. Jake shrugged, unsure how to respond without sounding boastful or dismissive. "We met yesterday. He's really down to earth." Before Dion could press further, the gymnasium doors opened, and Stephen Curry walked in, accompanied by his small entourage of trainers and foundation staff. The children immediately rushed toward him, their voices rising in excitement, but Curry's security team gently held them back. Instead, Curry walked directly to where the college players were gathered. "Thanks for being here, everyone," he said, addressing them as colleagues rather than fans. "Today isn't about me, it's about these kids. Your job is to demonstrate, encourage, and connect. Many of these children have never had one-on-one coaching before. Make it count." Jake nodded along with the others, impressed by Curry's focus on the children rather than his own celebrity. When Curry's eyes met his, there was a subtle nod of recognition, but no special treatment, exactly how Jake preferred it. The clinic began with basic drills: dribbling, passing, shooting form. Jake found himself assigned to the youngest group, working with children whose basketballs sometimes seemed bigger than their heads. One boy in particular, a skinny 8-year-old named Marcus, struggled to control his dribble, the ball constantly escaping his small hands. "You're hitting the ball too hard," Jake explained, kneeling to the boy's level. "Basketball's about feel, about touch." He demonstrated a softer dribble. "Try to feel the ball with your fingertips, not your palm." Marcus tried again, his face scrunched in concentration. The ball bounced once, twice, 3 times before rolling away. "That's better," Jake encouraged. "2 more dribbles than last time." Across the court, Curry moved between groups, offering pointers and encouragement. Jake couldn't help but notice how he gave the struggling players more attention than the naturals, a coaching philosophy Jake immediately respected. Midway through the clinic, Curry called everyone to center court for a demonstration. "I need a volunteer to help me show proper shooting technique," he announced, scanning the crowd of eager children. Every young hand shot into the air, voices pleading to be chosen. But Curry's eyes settled on Marcus, who stood shyly at the back of the group, his hand raised only halfway. "You there in the blue shirt," Curry called. "Come on up." Marcus froze, eyes widening in disbelief. Jake gave him a gentle nudge forward. "Go on, he picked you." The boy walked tentatively to center court where Curry waited with a basketball. "What's your name?" "Marcus," came the barely audible reply. "Marcus, you've been working hard with Coach Jake over there. I've been watching you improve. Now, let's work on that shot together." Jake felt a surge of pride, hearing Curry refer to him as Coach Jake. Even more surprising was that Curry had noticed Marcus's small improvements amid the chaos of the clinic. For the next few minutes, Curry patiently guided Marcus through the fundamentals of shooting: foot position, elbow alignment, follow-through. When Marcus finally made a shot, the entire gymnasium erupted in cheers. The boy's face lit up with a joy that transcended basketball. "That's what it's all about," Curry said quietly to Jake when they crossed paths later. That moment, when they realized they're capable of more than they thought. It's the same at every level, from kids like Marcus to players like you. The connection between Curry's words and Jake's own situation wasn't lost on him. Yesterday, he too had been shown he was capable of more than he'd believed. As the clinic continued, Jake found himself sharing more than just basketball techniques with his young charges. When a frustrated girl named Aaliyah wanted to quit after missing several shots, Jake shared his own struggles. "You know how many shots I missed before making the college team?" he asked her. "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Missing shots isn't failure, it's practice." Aaliyah considered this, then picked up her ball again. "So you're still not perfect at basketball?" Jake laughed. "Not even close. Ask any player here, even Mr. Curry. We're all still learning." By the final hour of the clinic, the gym had transformed from a collection of individual players into a community. Children who had arrived as strangers were now cheering for each other's successes. College players who normally competed against one another were collaborating, sharing coaching tips and encouragement. The event culminated with Curry gathering everyone in a large circle at center court. "Basketball is more than a game," he told them. "It's a bridge that connects people from different backgrounds, different neighborhoods, different life experiences. The skills you learn here, perseverance, teamwork, supporting others when they're down, those translate to everything in life." His eyes swept across the circle, lingering momentarily on Jake. Sometimes the greatest players aren't the ones with the most natural talent. They're the ones who face the biggest obstacles and keep pushing forward anyway. After closing remarks and a group photo, the children lined up for autographs and high fives. Jake helped distribute water bottles and participation certificates, watching how Curry made each child feel individually seen and valued, the same way he had made Jake feel at the diner. As the crowd thinned and parents collected their children, Curry approached Jake. "Walk with me a minute?" They moved toward the empty bleachers, away from listening ears. Have you thought about our conversation this morning? Curry asked. Jake nodded. I have, and I'd be honored to accept the scholarship. Curry's face broke into a genuine smile. I'm glad to hear it. But I have one request, Jake continued, surprising himself with his boldness. I'd like to be involved in selecting future recipients. Like you said, I know firsthand what other walk-ons are going through. Rather than being offended by the condition, Curry seemed impressed. Consider it done. We need people with your perspective to make this program what it should be. They shook hands, the agreement feeling more like a partnership than charity. There's one more thing, Curry said, glancing toward the gym entrance where a woman with a camera stood waiting. ESPN is doing a feature on community basketball programs. They were filming parts of the clinic, and they're interested in your story, how we met, the scholarship, everything. Would you be comfortable sharing it? Jake hesitated. He'd never sought attention, had always preferred to work quietly toward his goals. It's completely up to you, Curry assured him, but sometimes sharing your journey can help others realize they're not alone in their struggles. Jake thought about Marcus, about Aaliyah, about Dion and the other walk-ons, all fighting their own battles with the same quiet determination he recognized in himself. If it might help someone else, then yes, he decided, I'll do the interview. Neither of them could have predicted how that single interview would catalyze a movement across college sports, how Jake's story would shine a light on the unseen struggles of walk-on athletes nationwide. What began as a chance encounter in a diner was about to spark a conversation about opportunity, recognition, and the true meaning of athletic merit that would reach far beyond basketball. Jake Wilson, the broke college athlete who had been denied service just 24 hours earlier, was about to find his voice. And with Stephen Curry's platform behind it, that voice would carry further than he ever imagined possible. The ESPN interview took place in the empty gymnasium, Jake and Stephen Curry sitting on folding chairs at center court. Light from the high windows created a natural spotlight between them as a small crew adjusted cameras and microphones. The interviewer, a veteran sports journalist named Candace Parker, had covered everything from NBA championships to Olympic basketball. Just be yourself, Curry advised, as makeup artists made final touches. Tell your story the way you told it to me. No need to dramatize or downplay anything. Jake nodded, trying to calm his nerves. His phone had been buzzing nonstop with texts from teammates, classmates, and even professors who had somehow heard about the scholarship. The university's public relations department had already scheduled a press conference for tomorrow morning, an event Jake had never imagined being the focus of. We're rolling in 3, 2, 1. The producer pointed to Candace, and the interview began. I'm here with NBA superstar Stephen Curry and State University point guard Jake Wilson for a story that began with a chance encounter and evolved into something much more significant. Candace opened, turning to Curry. Stephen, you've created countless memorable moments on the court, but tell us about this off-court moment that's generating so much buzz. Curry recounted their meeting at the diner with the same humility and thoughtfulness that had struck Jake from the beginning. He described seeing Jake being asked to leave, following him outside, and their conversation over burgers. What impressed me wasn't Jake's hardship, though his situation is unfortunately common among walk-on athletes. What impressed me was his resilience, his refusal to use that hardship as an excuse, Curry explained. Here's a young man working nights, maintaining his grades in engineering, and still showing up to practice with the energy and focus needed to compete at the Division I level. Candace turned to Jake. Jake, take us through your side of this story. What was going through your mind when you realized Stephen Curry was talking to you in the rain? Jake smiled, remembering his disbelief. Honestly, I thought I was hallucinating from hunger at first, he admitted, earning a laugh from the crew. But once I realized it was really him, what struck me was how normal our conversation felt. He wasn't Stephen Curry, the superstar, in that moment. He was just someone who recognized another basketball player going through a tough time. And now you're the first recipient of the Stephen Curry Academic Athletic Merit Scholarship, Candace noted. How will this change your college experience? Jake took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. It changes everything and nothing at the same time. The financial burden being lifted, that's life-changing. I won't have to choose between textbooks and groceries, or miss team film sessions because I'm working late shifts. He paused, looking directly at the camera. But the work doesn't change. the responsibility doesn't change. If anything, it increases. Now, I have to prove this investment in me is worthwhile, not just to the foundation, but to every walk-on athlete who might benefit from this program in the future. Candace nodded appreciatively at his answer. Stephen, this scholarship program is launching at State University, but are there plans to expand it? Absolutely, Curry confirmed. My foundation is already in talks with several other universities. Our goal is to create a network of support for student athletes who demonstrate exceptional character and work ethic despite financial obstacles. And as Jake mentioned, he'll be involved in selecting future recipients. The interview continued, touching on the broader issues of student-athlete compensation, academic pressures, and mental health. Throughout it all, Jake felt a growing confidence in speaking his truth, not just for himself, but for teammates and competitors facing similar challenges. One final question for both of you, Candace said. What message do you hope this story sends to young athletes watching at home? Curry considered for a moment. I hope it reminds them that everyone's path is different. Success isn't about avoiding obstacles. It's about how you respond to them. Jake's story exemplifies that. When Jake's turn came, he surprised himself with his answer. I hope it reminds them that they're seen, that their struggles matter, even when it feels like no one's noticing. 24 hours ago, I was at my breaking point, ready to give up on basketball. Now I'm sitting here with Stephen Curry, talking about a scholarship program that might help hundreds of athletes like me. He glanced at Curry before continuing. But the most important part of this story isn't the scholarship. It's that moment in the rain when someone took the time to see me as more than just a broke college kid getting kicked out of a diner. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change everything. After the cameras stopped rolling, Candace shook Jake's hand. That was genuine and powerful. This story is going to resonate with a lot of people. She wasn't wrong. By that evening, clips from the interview had already gone viral on social media. The hashtag #, more than a walk-on, was trending, with current and former walk-on athletes sharing their own stories of financial struggle and perseverance. Back in his apartment, Jake sat on the edge of his bed, watching his phone explode with notifications. Tyler, his roommate, sat beside him, equally astonished at the turn of events. Dude, you're famous, Tyler marveled, scrolling through Twitter. Look, even Coach K shared your interview. Jake shook his head in disbelief. This is insane. Yesterday I couldn't afford a burger, and today I'm trending on social media. His phone rang, his mother calling for the third time that day. Have you seen the news? She asked without preamble. You're on the homepage of every sports website. Your father's been showing the interview to everyone at the factory. Jake laughed, imagining his stoic father proudly displaying his phone to co-workers. It's surreal, Mom. I keep waiting to wake up. Well, don't wake up yet, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. We're so proud of you, Jake. Not because you met Stephen Curry or got a scholarship, but because when your moment came, you spoke from the heart. You represented every parent who's watched their child struggle to keep a dream alive. After hanging up, Jake noticed an email from Director Peterson. The subject line read, "Office space." The brief message informed him that as part of his scholarship package, he would have access to a small office in the athletic complex, a quiet place to study between practice and classes. It was a small detail compared to the tuition coverage, but somehow it moved Jake deeply. An office meant belonging, meant legitimacy. It meant no more studying in noisy hallways or at the back of the library after closing time. The following morning, Coach Reynolds caught Jake before team practice, pulling him aside in the locker room. Wilson, I owe you an apology. Jake looked up in surprise. For what, Coach? For not seeing what Curry saw immediately, Reynolds said frankly. I knew you were working hard, knew you were struggling financially, but I saw it as just part of paying your dues, not as an unnecessary barrier to your success. The coach's candor was unexpected. It's okay, Coach. I never complained because I didn't want special treatment. That's just it, Reynolds replied. This isn't special treatment, it's equal opportunity. Scholarship players don't worry about making rent or working night shifts. They can focus entirely on academics and basketball. You've been competing with one hand, tied behind your back, and that's on me for not advocating harder. Before Jake could respond, his teammates began filing into the locker room. Many had seen the interview, and a mixture of reactions played across their faces: pride, admiration, and in a few cases, something that looked like envy. Dion approached first, extending his hand. "Way to represent the walk-ons, man. That interview, you said everything we've been feeling but couldn't put into words." One by one, teammates expressed similar sentiments. Even Travis, a scholarship player who had rarely acknowledged Jake outside of practice, offered congratulations. "What you said about being seen, that hit home. We all need that, scholarship or not." As Jake changed into his practice gear, he noticed something different. The weight of uncertainty that had pressed on his shoulders for so long had lifted. In its place was a new kind of pressure, the positive pressure of opportunity, of responsibility, of knowing his words and actions now carried influence beyond the basketball court. What he didn't yet realize was that the interview's impact was still growing, rippling outward through the sports world in ways that would soon return to him multiplied. The next chapter of this unexpected journey would reveal just how far a single act of recognition could reach, and how many lives it could touch in the process. The university's media room buzzed with anticipation. Blue and white banners adorned the walls, and camera crews from local and national networks packed the space, a level of attention typically reserved for championship victories. Jake sat between Stephen Curry and Director Peterson, his borrowed team blazer feeling simultaneously too tight and too large, the weight of the moment pressed against his skin. "Just follow my lead," Director Peterson whispered during preliminary photos, short, grateful answers. Jake nodded, but Curry's subtle headshake suggested a different approach: be authentic, not scripted. President Harlow stepped to the podium, his silver hair catching the camera lights. "Today marks a historic partnership between State University and the Stephen Curry Foundation," he began, his voice polished from years of donor announcements. "This scholarship program represents more than financial support. It's a commitment to recognizing true athletic merit." Jake scanned the room, surprised by familiar faces. Professor Wheeler from his engineering ethics class sat near the back. The campus bookstore manager who had accommodated his erratic work schedule was present. Even Doug from the diner stood along the wall, his expression unreadable. These were the witnesses to his daily struggle, people who had either helped or hindered his journey in small, seemingly insignificant ways. Now they watched his transformation in real time. When Jake's turn came, he approached the podium with measured steps, press conference lights momentarily blinding him. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steadier than expected. 48 hours ago, I was a walk-on player balancing basketball, academics, and survival. Today, I'm still that same player, just with an incredible burden lifted from my shoulders." He glanced at Curry, drawing strength from the superstar's encouraging nod. "This scholarship isn't just changing my life. It's changing how we think about athletic opportunity," Jake continued. "Walk-on athletes across the country push themselves to their limits, not for glory, but for love of their sport. We work the same hours, run the same drills as scholarship players, while juggling financial stress." The room fell silent. Journalists who anticipated a standard feel-good announcement now leaned forward intently. "What Mr. Curry did outside that diner wasn't charity," Jake emphasized. "It was recognition. Recognition of effort, sacrifice, perseverance. And sometimes, that recognition is more valuable than financial support." Reporters' questions came rapid fire. Most targeted Curry about his foundation's plans, but several directed inquiries to Jake, treating him as a legitimate partner rather than a charity case. "How will you be involved in selecting future scholarship recipients?" asked a Sports Illustrated reporter. "I'll work with the foundation to develop criteria beyond statistics," Jake explained. "We'll consider work commitments, family responsibilities, and how players contribute to team culture, even without playing time." By late afternoon, Jake finally checked his phone. The result left him speechless. His Instagram followers had exploded from hundreds to over 50,000. His simple thank you post to Curry had hundreds of thousands of likes. More meaningful were the thousands of direct messages from walk-on athletes nationwide, sharing stories of financial struggle and athletic perseverance. A basketball player from a Division II school described working warehouse night shifts. A volleyball player shared how she lived in her car during one semester. A track athlete explained sending half his work-study money home to support his siblings. Sitting on a bench outside the athletic complex, Jake scrolled through message after message, tears blurring his vision. This was bigger than his individual story. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" Curry's voice interrupted his reflection. Jake nodded, wiping his eyes. "I had no idea how many others were experiencing the same struggles." "That's why your voice matters," Curry responded. "You've opened a door that's been closed for too long." A notification buzzed. An email from the NCAA. Jake opened it with trembling fingers. "They want me to participate in a panel discussion on student-athlete welfare," he told Curry in disbelief. "They're forming a committee to examine walk-on support programs." Curry's smile widened. That's how change happens. One story becomes many. Many voices become a movement. Later, Jake noticed Marcus, the young boy from the basketball clinic, hanging back while Curry signed autographs. "Hey Marcus," he called. "How's that jump shot?" The boy approached shyly. "I've been practicing. My dad put up a hoop in our driveway after the clinic." As Marcus demonstrated his improved shooting form, his father approached. "I showed Marcus your interview," he said quietly. "Told him that's what perseverance looks like." Jake recognized the same mixture of pride and concern he'd seen in his own parents' eyes. "The most important thing isn't the scholarship," he told the father. "It's knowing someone believes in you." As sunset painted long shadows across the quad, Jake realized how completely his life had transformed in just 2 days. From near anonymous struggle to becoming a voice for walk-on athletes nationwide. What began as a moment of humiliation, being asked to leave a diner for lack of money, had become a catalyst for a movement extending far beyond himself, beyond Curry, beyond State University. The scholarship was just the beginning. The recognition was spreading, creating ripples of awareness that would reach thousands of silent, struggling student athletes. As Marcus sank a perfect jump shot, his face illuminated by pure achievement, Jake understood the true power of Stephen Curry's gesture, not the money or media attention, but the chain reaction of recognition and opportunity. This was just the beginning. 2 months after that fateful day in the diner, Jake Wilson's life had become something he never could have imagined. The Stephen Curry Academic Athletic Merit Scholarship had done more than just solve his financial struggles. It had transformed him into a national voice for walk-on athletes across the country. The NCAA panel discussion had been just the beginning. Jake found himself speaking at high schools, colleges, and athletic conferences, sharing his story with a vulnerability that resonated with thousands. His Instagram following had grown to over 250,000, and messages continued to pour in from student athletes who saw themselves in his journey. But the most profound changes were happening behind the scenes. The scholarship program that began with Jake had now expanded to 10 universities, with plans to reach 20 more by the end of the year. Athletic departments were re-examining how they supported walk-on athletes, creating support systems that went beyond traditional scholarships. One crisp autumn morning, Jake found himself back at Pete's Diner, the very place where his life had changed. Doug, the manager who had once asked him to leave, now greeted him with a respectful nod. The irony wasn't lost on Jake. Sometimes, recognition came in the most unexpected ways. Stephen Curry continued to be a mentor, but more importantly, a friend. They spoke weekly, discussing not just the scholarship program, but Jake's growing role as an advocate for student athletes. What had started as a chance encounter had blossomed into a partnership that was changing lives. Jake's engineering studies took on new meaning. He wasn't just working toward a degree anymore, he was preparing to create systemic solutions for the challenges student athletes faced. His senior project focused on developing a support platform that could connect walk-on athletes with resources, mentorship, and potential scholarship opportunities. As he prepared for a speaking engagement at a national athletic conference, Jake reflected on the journey. The boy who had been ready to give up just months ago was now standing on stages, sharing a message of hope and perseverance. The scholarship wasn't just financial support, it was a megaphone for every unrecognized athlete fighting to pursue their dreams. The most powerful moments came from the unexpected connections. Marcus, the young basketball player from the youth clinic, had become something of a mascot for the program. His father sent updates about how the experience had transformed their family's perspective on opportunity and perseverance. During one of their conversations, Curry shared a piece of wisdom that Jake would carry with him forever. "Success isn't about the destination," he told Jake. "It's about lighting the path for others who are still finding their way." As the chapter of his life that began in that rainy diner came to a close, Jake understood that his story was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning. Wow, what an incredible journey. If Jake's story touched your heart, we want to hear from you. Have you ever felt overlooked or underestimated? Share your story of perseverance in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their struggles matter. Remember, your journey is unique, your struggles are valid, and your potential is limitless. One moment of recognition can change everything.